I need to tell you something. I think games have this terrible problem of revealing way too much in their marketing. That's why I've tried to ignore it for games that I have remotely any interest in these days. It's an old habit I'm trying to kick, and I find that it really enhances your experience if you go in blind. So when I went clinically insane during the last Steam summer sale, probably like a lot of others, I tried really hard to not look at anything that would give too much away. And that was how I found the game Signalis. I literally only saw the title and the tag for survival horror and just threw it into my already overflowing cart. I usually wouldn't do this, as I like to err on the side of caution during my annual summer sale induced psychosis. Luckily, I found out later that I stumbled upon an absolute gem of a modern survival horror game once I finally got around to clearing out my backlog of untapped games. I literally can't find anything I don't like about this game. It's quickly becoming one of my favorites as of late, and it really boils down to its loyalty to the games of old while still being able to create its own personality. Signalis is a modern survival horror masterpiece that takes inspiration from the best in the genre while building its own identity through its immersive universe and incredible story. So lend me your ear for a minute as I give you my thoughts on what's become one of the best survival horror games I've ever played. I know I just got done glazing Signalis from head to toe just now, but I'm going to start my rant with what's possibly a hot take. I don't think Signalis does anything groundbreaking with its gameplay. I really don't mean that in a bad way. It's got all the pieces of your usual survival horror game. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of calling itself that. You expect certain things out of really any genre. It's still an insanely complex and enjoyable experience, probably because it takes all the best and leaves in very little of the worst in survival horror. If you like games like Resident Evil, Dead Space, and maybe even a little bit of Silent Hill, I think you'll see what I mean. Signalis makes for a pretty familiar, or even nostalgic experience for survival horror fans. After playing more than my fair share of this game, I can see where it might have borrowed some ideas from. The game has you exploring and solving puzzles for the most part, with lots of combat sprinkled in. You'll find the lore and hints to puzzles in scattered notes as you wander about. The same goes for resources like ammo and healing items. All of this is done between backtracking and making many pit stops to the nearest save rooms. And all of this stuff is really the bulk of the gameplay. I know, water is wet and absolutely none of this is new to you if you've played survival horror games. A lot of the gameplay loop feels like a classic Resident Evil experience. All that being said, what Signalis incorporates into its gameplay is executed very well. Puzzles are pretty important in this game, as they're what dictates your progression through the story. And I'll say they're pretty damn good. It's a nice blend of unique puzzles and your usual collectathon of special keys, or rather ominous doohickeys. The solutions aren't that easy to come by either. Be prepared to think a little harder than in other games you've played. Then again, it might just be me. I remember finding this lockpicking puzzle and spent a rather embarrassing 20 to 30 minutes trying to figure it out, with the first 10 being me just fiddling with the shiny buttons before finding out they're more than just for decoration. I'm American. This happens a lot. Combat in Signalis is pretty standard for a survival horror game. It's slow and methodical to give you time to think about how you'll negotiate with the enemies roaming around. I prefer to pack rat all the goodies I find and plan my routes to avoid combat where I can. Eventually you will have to fight against the various enemies of the game, but it's still satisfying when you do. Tank controls make a comeback as well. You can move while aiming with weapons, but it's pretty damn slow and you can only aim at one enemy at a time. I got mobbed by enemies pretty often because I forgot that I'm not a freak of nature that can outmaneuver them easily. Really amps up the combat's tension. Enemies have a chance to get back up after a while too. They can be put down for good with these special flares that burn them to a crisp. If you've played the RE1 remake, think of the Crimson Heads from that game. It's kind of the same thing. Inventory management is integral to the gameplay of Signalis. It encourages a lot of backtracking and reorganizing your stuff in save rooms as part of the gameplay loop. There's even some options to make inventory management easier if that's more your style. I prefer the default system the game uses, but that's just me. All these individual systems create a very well executed survival horror experience. Each piece of the game ties to the others, so you're constantly engaging with the entirety of what the gameplay has to offer. That said, it's all drawn from the greatest survival horror games of the past. That's probably why it works so well. It's all the best and little of the worst. So now comes the issue of how Signalis is supposed to differentiate itself from others in an already packed survival horror genre. All of what I've mentioned so far is pretty standard for survival horror. It's been established as the norm for decades. That's not at all to say that Signalis lacks any distinct gameplay features whatsoever. I think what it adds helps develop its personality as a modern survival horror game. To start, the game has what it calls modules. These would normally be tools in any other survival horror game, but Signalis makes certain modules function like items that take space in your inventory. Not to confuse them with disposable items like the bolt cutters from various Resident Evil games, modules stick with you until you finish the game and need to be held onto if you want to use them. The first one that comes to mind is the flashlight. To the surprise of hopefully nobody, it lights up dark rooms. What's neat about it is that you can't interact with the environment of a dark room without having the flashlight turned on. That means you can't pick up items or open doors without sacrificing inventory space. Even if you're like me and played this game way too much and know every nook and cranny of the world, you still need the flashlight to do anything in dark rooms. The light also makes you easier to spot for enemies, so there's a bit of a trade-off to keeping it on you for too long. The other module is this weird eye-shaped camera that takes screenshots of whatever you're looking at. I found it pretty useful to solve the more complicated puzzles that tested the limits of my public education. And as far as I know, there's only one in the whole game, so it acts like a resource as opposed to a gimmick. I know you're able to bypass this specific module by just taking a regular Steam screenshot, but where's the fun in that? Another module the game introduces is the radio. This functions more like an add-on to your character, so it doesn't take any inventory space. You'll be using this a lot to solve puzzles and during certain combat encounters. It's a pretty cool touch and adds an interesting bit of identity to the gameplay. Also, if you tune the radio to certain frequencies, you can pick up on some interesting broadcasts. I found some creepy ones that I think help build the atmosphere of Signalis. These modules are where a lot of the gameplay's personality shines. I haven't played other games that put a spin on their tools the way this one does. Another interesting addition is easily skippable weapons. I know this isn't new to survival horror, but I like the idea. I've played a lot of games that more or less just hand you their weapons. You might need some specific items, but you'll find those pretty quickly too. Signalis tries not to make things that easy. Some of the really good weapons in Signalis are locked behind more exploration or key items that require a bit more digging to use. You can miss out on a good chunk of the arsenal if you don't poke around a bit more. Now, I'm not going to point any fingers, but somebody might have missed the revolver, and the rifle, and didn't know how to use grenade rounds until the last 2 hours of the game, all in his first playthrough. I'm American, this happens a lot. The upside to me being a meets expectations sort of guy is that I got to play again and collect all these things the second time around. I'll take literally any excuse to play more of this game. Gameplay feels great in Signalis, and these extra things help build its brand a bit more, but it isn't exactly revolutionary when looking at other survival horror games. So to compensate, the game relies more on its artistic design to distinguish itself from the greats. And take my word for it, it executes on those parts perfectly. Spoiler alert for the rest of this video, I'm not going to spoil the plot of Signalis. That absolute mindfuck is going to be something for another day. All I'll say is the story is the main ingredient behind its greatness. It's hands down my favorite part of this whole masterpiece. As much as I really want to share my half-baked interpretations of the story right now, I'll spare you the details and say one thing. If you like deep, emotional stories with heavier themes and messaging, play this game. Seriously, I think you'll absolutely love the story. It's at least my biggest reason to give the game a try. No spoilers here though. Instead, I want to talk about the equally great world building of Signalis. I think it makes some great decisions to help build its unique identity. I'm sure you've noticed from the footage I'm using that Signalis uses a pixelated, low-resolution art style. It's very old-fashioned compared to the more photorealistic games of late. The low-res visual style makes for a pretty standout aesthetic. I like the focus on less visual fidelity, instead of insane realism, meant to create shock value with disturbing imagery. You'll see plenty of gore like any other horror game, but at least it's more interesting in Signalis. The UI is also fantastic. It's far from minimalist and adds a lot of charm to the already great visual style of the game. Very nice to see every time you open up the menus. The game uses a top-down camera for most of its gameplay, but every now and then, you'll enter some first-person views for puzzles or scripted events in the game. Very cool if you ask me. I think what Signalis does with its camera is great and puts the spotlight on the work done to create its environments. Speaking of the environment, all of the game's locations are visually outstanding. They carry a lot of the atmosphere and world building on their shoulders. Signalis is exceedingly brutalist. Most levels are nothing more than concrete with flat gray tones, aside from a few select areas with more going on visually. If you've ever played Dead Space, you probably already made the connection. But I don't know, it's pretty subtle. The game also has this retro-futuristic vibe with a ton of old tech that I don't see used often, maybe aside from something like the Alien franchise. The really neat thing about Signalis is its heavy use of German and Chinese language in its world. Like, no joke, it's literally everywhere in this game. I think it's supposed to be a different take on the very Americanized genre of sci-fi. It's a pretty novel idea, and it really helps create a unique identity for Signalis. All this to say that Signalis does more than enough to create its own personality in an already stacked sci-fi horror genre. I'm a sucker for sci-fi in general, but especially in gaming, so I immediately fell in love with this game's aesthetic. The complexity of the world Signalis builds turns what should be a box-standard survival horror game into a truly one-of-one gaming experience. In a niche packed to the brim with classics, some of which are my all-time favorite games, Signalis had the gargantuan task of differentiating itself from the rest, and the game executes it perfectly. Its gameplay is good, but the story and world elevate it far beyond a regular horror game into something with an incredibly distinct identity. As much as I want to hammer that last point home by talking about the story, I won't. I think that's something you should experience for yourself first. But I think what I'm able to talk about without spoiling anything still shows how Signalis stands toe-to-toe with some of the greatest survival horror games. Signalis is flat out amazing. I really don't have any other way to put it. The game takes what makes survival horror great and builds upon that with fantastic world building and storytelling. I haven't seen a game do it this well in a long time. Seriously, in a genre that's been around longer than I have, I can't say enough how much this absolute gem stands out from the rest. Easily a 10 out of 10 for me. If you're anything like me and enjoy a classic survival horror experience with a deeper story than most, I cannot encourage you to try this game more than I already have. But with that, I think it's wraps for my nerdy rant for the day. I'm gonna stop my psychotic rambling and get back to what I really want to do. And that's play more Signalis. Before I take off and let you go on with your day, I just want to say if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I wanted to get this video out as soon as I could to scratch the massive YouTube itch I've had lately, so I appreciate you for sticking around this long. But I think you know what I'm going to ask you to do next. If you like what you saw, consider leaving a like, and if my psychotic rant on a game was at all what you'd like to see more of, maybe subscribe too. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. I know the scope of this video wasn't as crazy as the last one I made, but that's because that video took way too damn long to make, so I tried to make something a little less insane to get something out there. And if you were expecting me to talk about the story of Signalis, yeah, that's my bad. I really wanted to talk about it, but it was way too much to cover in this video and I really want to do it justice. If you're willing to give me some grace and maybe a shitload of time, I promise I'll have that out when it's ready. In the meantime, I'll be stewing in deep, chronic thought on some other ideas I have, so do stick around if you're interested. But seriously, thank you again for watching. And until I have something else to tell you, take care, and I'll see you soon.